Ryan asked me in the quiet way people say for questions they already know the answer to. We were in our kitchen, the hum of the fridge doing more work than either of us. The casserole a neighbor had dropped off cooling untouched on the counter like an accusation. My phone was face down between us because he'd placed it there, carefully, like evidence that didn't need to be waved around. "Did you sleep with Derek?" he said, "before he died?" There are sentences you can talk your way around, and there are sentences built like locked doors. I could have lied. I had already lied by omission, which is just a polite word for it. I stared at the knot in the butcher block, and tried to find a language that would make the truth feel less sharp. "Yes," I said. He didn't flinch. Ryan is the kind of man who indexes his reactions. He nodded like a paramedic counting a pulse, then looked past me to the window, where the alley threw up its same unglamorous view. Recycling bins, a strip of sky, a neighbor's basil dying of neglect. I wanted him to shout. Shouting would have given me a rhythm. He chose silence, which made my heart stumble. 2 weeks before the accident, I said, uncorking the rest because once a thing begins there's a strange relief in letting it fall. He texted that he was going to rehab in Arizona, that he wanted to see me to say goodbye. I went to the motel by the interstate because that's where he said he felt safest, like nobody would overhear. I told myself I was going for closure. It wasn't. We slept together. Once. I swallowed. I told you I was meeting Alana for drinks. She covered for me without knowing what she was covering. Ryan closed his eyes. I don't think I've ever seen someone grieve and appraise in the same breath. You told me you were done with him, he said quietly. You said you hadn't even texted in over a year. I hadn't, I said. Not until that night. He nodded again, like he was inserting pins on a map. He reached for his glass, took a slow sip of water, he probably didn't taste, and set it down exactly where it had been. Why did you go? Because Derek was the first person who made chaos feel like church. Because I met him at 22 and mistook adrenaline for devotion. Because he could make a joke in a waiting room and make you forget what you were waiting for. Because when someone you loved at an unwise age says, I want to be better, your ribs remember their old trick of opening for him like a door. Because I wanted to be the kind of woman who could show up for a goodbye without catching fire. Because I wanted to be kinder than I am, I said, which is a rotten reason to lie to someone good. Because he asked. Because I thought if I gave him one decent memory, he'd carry it into rehab like a medal. Because I am more sentimental than smart. Ryan exhaled. He has this tiny scar on his chin he got in middle school trying to grind on a rail with a skateboard. He didn't know how to ride. He told me that on our second date, hands making shapes in the air, laughing at himself because he's not precious. Right now that scar looked like a notch cut into dignity. Did you use protection? He asked, measured. A real question, not a trap. Yes. The one small mercy. I'm not pregnant, there's nothing. I stopped. There's nothing like that to tell you. He nodded once, grateful and dead-eyed. Okay. We met Derek's mother 2 days earlier at the memorial. She hugged me the way mothers hug the girls whose names they learned at their dinner table, back when we were all sloppy with pasta and invincible. She pressed a folded program into my hand and said, I'm glad you got to talk to him last month. The sentence slid by Ryan like a bicyclist in the bike lane, close enough to graze. He didn't ask me about it in the church. He didn't ask me at the luncheon. He waited until the casserole had cooled and the cards had been stacked by the fruit bowl, and then he asked plainly, like a man who would prefer the floor not be a trap. I loved you enough to go to that service, he said, voice steady. I sat behind a row of men who knew more about your past than I did, and I wanted to be the partner who could hold your grief without making it about me. He tapped the face-down phone with one knuckle, a tiny merciful sound. And then I saw the message from his sister. Thanks for being there for him for that night. He told me he felt like a person again after he saw you. He breathed carefully. So I'm asking, was I holding your grief or your guilt? Both, I said, because I've run out of rugs to sweep under. I am sorry. He closed his eyes longer this time. When he opened them, decision had taken a seat beside the sorrow. I'm going to stay at Jake's for a while, he said. Not to punish you. To keep a boundary from evaporating under a casserole. Can we talk? I asked, instinctively reaching for his wrist, like you can anchor someone to a conversation if you know where their pulse lives. He stepped back a half inch. We're talking. It wasn't cruel. It was a refusal to play the part where I make contact into atonement. We'd been together 3 years, living together for 18 months in a 2-bedroom we chose because it had a crooked fireplace and a landlord who let us paint. Ryan is an engineer. He measures twice and drills once, literally and otherwise. He has a toolbox I tease him about that is organized like a small library. He brought order to my life the way lighting brings order to a room. Not flashy, just correct. He was never the kind of man who made me a better story to tell my friends. He is the kind of man who made Tuesdays feel like a plan. Derek was the boy my 20s are a scrapbook about. We met at an open mic when I still thought I might be brave enough to read what I wrote into a microphone one day. He had a voice you recognize across a bar, and a shelf of paperbacks with receipts tucked in like a habit. He also had a talent for finding edges with his face. DUI at 24. A pill bottle in the glove compartment that belonged to no one you could call. The way he made apologies sound like songs. I left him 4 times before it stuck. Then I met Ryan. He didn't dazzle me. He steadied me. I told myself that meant I was finally ready for the kind of love that didn't need a soundtrack. The night at the motel, Derek had texted that he was clean that week, that he had a bed waiting in a rehab if he could make it until Friday, that he wanted to say goodbye like a person who didn't leave chaos in the kitchens of women he'd loved. I showered because guilt wants props, I think. I wore jeans like a uniform. I put on the necklace he gave me at 25 without admitting what that meant. He cried a little, and I held his face because muscles have memory. We talked about the version of our life where we were 35 and boring, and how we weren't built for it back then. He touched my knee, and I let him take more. If you're looking for a reason, you'll find only desire dressed in costume. He died in a crash on the interstate a week later, a semi drifting in rain. It wasn't a morality play. It was weather and timing and a driver who should have stopped for coffee. The grieving was real and uncomplicated until Ryan asked me the right question. Then it complicated fast. He didn't pack that night. He washed the 2 plates we hadn't used and wiped down the counter because he cleans when he is thinking. He put his phone back in his pocket like a man who's decided not to keep initiating a text thread with someone who won't answer. I'll be here at 9 in the morning to grab some things, he said. I'll send you a list. I'll pay my half of rent until the lease is up. I'm not leaving you with a mess. That's... Thank you, I said, ashamed that gratitude was even in the room. We're in a contract with the landlord, he said, practical, not performative. The rest is not a contract I can enforce. He slept on the couch that night, and left before sunrise for a shower at the gym like a man who knows where the hot water is when a house stops feeling like his. He texted me a neat list an hour later. Clothes, laptop, tools, the camping gear that lives in the coat closet, the coffee scale he loves because his pour-over is a religion. He put a question mark next to the plant we both forgot to water. You can keep it, I wrote back. We know how that ends. Jake lives 6 blocks away, and owns exactly 1 chair more than he needs. Ryan stayed there for a week, and didn't let me make his life my problem. He sent money for his half of the Wi-Fi and utilities. He declined dinner twice. He didn't ask me for an explanation beyond the one I'd given. He gave me the dignity of believing me while refusing to be the man who gets used up by my honesty. The day after the memorial, I called a therapist because at some point you have to pay someone to sit in a room and listen while you take inventory of the bridges you set fire to in the name of closure. She had the kind of face that makes people confess in grocery stores. You can grieve 2 men and still be the villain in this chapter, she said gently, and I wanted to lie face down on her rug. She explained ambiguous grief, the kind people have when the person they lost isn't who they could have been. She taught me words like rupture and repair, and I said, what if the person you ruptured with doesn't want to repair? She said, then you repair with yourself so you don't make the next man the bill collector for this debt. We did the banal administrative work that love requires even when it is ending. We emailed the landlord to ask about the sublet policy in case neither of us could stand the lease's gravity. The landlord replied in caps, like landlords do, no sublets, but you can add a roommate if they pass credit. Ryan wrote, I'll keep paying my half through July. If you need to move before then, I'll help you list it and meet the realtor. He copied me on the emails because that's who he is. Transparent when he can be. We also had to talk about Biscuit, our cat, who had chosen Ryan as her person even though I was the one who wanted a pet. Microchip in my name, vet bills split in my budgeting app, litter box cleaning in a shared calendar because adulthood is just recurring tasks. She should stay with you, he said, looking at the cat with a face that wasn't his business face or his leaving face but something like sorrow without theater. Your schedule's more home. I travel. I'll pay for half the care through the lease. After that, you can tell me if you need help. I won't disappear on a creature that trusts me, even if I never sit on that couch again. People always want to know about phones. He didn't go through mine that night. He didn't need to. The text from Derek's sister popped up while we were slicing the neighbor's casserole as a mercy for our hands. He could have demanded every message from the last 5 years. He didn't. He trusted me to tell him the worst part. When I did, he chose not to stay. That, it turns out, is the kind of man you can admire even while he is walking away. My mother's face on FaceTime when I told her looked like the first 10 seconds of a thunderstorm. He's a good man, she said, which is the kind of sentence that makes you feel 16 and 40 at the same time. He is, I said. I didn't act like a good woman. She didn't rush to soften it. She said, you can be both, grieving and wrong. Derek's sister texted again the week after the funeral. A photo of old Polaroids spread out on a table, our awkward, sparkling faces frozen at 23 under a string of Christmas lights that belonged to no holiday. Would you want any of these? She wrote. I can mail them. I stared at a picture of Derek kissing my cheek, while I tried to look dignified holding a plastic cup. I typed, maybe one, and then deleted it. I wrote, thank you for offering. I have what I need. It felt like telling the past that I loved it, and it didn't get to move in. When Ryan came by to get the rest of his things, he did it between 10 and noon like a contractor with a permit. He had 3 labeled boxes and a hand truck, and the kind of face you wear when you are doing physical labor to organize the internal kind. He left the coffee grinder on the counter. I bought a cheap one, he said. You make better coffee. He took the toolbox because the toolbox is his. He opened the junk drawer and laughed without humor at how much of it was his. Batteries, tape, a stud finder, the good scissors. He left me the good scissors. You'll need them, he said, meaning more than paper. Can I say one thing? I asked, because I suddenly wanted to fill the air with human sounds so I wouldn't have to listen to the scraping noise of dignity being moved down a hallway. He waited, generous to the end. I loved you while I did a bad thing, I said. I didn't cheat because you weren't enough. I cheated because I am a coward about endings. He nodded, not granting me absolution, not snatching it away. I believe you, he said. I just can't live in a house where that sentence is the foundation. He lifted the last box and at the door, turned like he was going to say something cinematic. He didn't. He said, please don't reach out to his family with a confession they didn't ask for. Don't make your penance their burden. Then he left. I sat on the floor of the hallway and cried in the anticlimactic way you do when the missing is as heavy as the guilt. It is a strange thing to become the person people gossip about in the kind of gentle, concerned voices they think won't reach you. I heard snippets at the office and at the coffee shop where I read on Sundays. She went to her ex's funeral. He found out something. He moved out like a gentleman. The like a gentleman was the part that made me cry on the bus, not because it was wrong but because it was right. He made leaving graceful. He won by refusing to turn me into content. I did the uninteresting work. I told our landlord I'd likely move when the lease ended. I found a studio with a window that looked at another window and told myself it was a choice. I made a budget that didn't include Trader Joe's flowers. I took Biscuit to the vet and told the tech, it'll just be me today, and didn't explain. I threw out the motel receipt I'd kept like a talisman of self-loathing. I put the necklace in a box and labeled it 200% bad idea, because humor is a bandage I know how to apply. I also went to a grief group in the basement of a church that smelled like coffee and felt like a courtroom where no one objected. People talked about deaths that made mine look small, and no one kept score. A woman whose wife had died after a long illness said, love did everything it could. I wrote it down, then crossed it out, then wrote under it, sometimes love did not. If you're waiting for a scene where Ryan forgives me over a cappuccino months later, while Rain art directs our faces, there isn't one. He sent me a single email when the lease ended with a spreadsheet that would have made an accountant weep. Deposit balance, prorated rent, final utility adjustments, his Venmo to me for the last electric bill because he'd forgotten the autopay was on his card. He wrote, thank you for keeping your half of the obligations. I wish you well. He didn't add a condition or ask for news. He didn't ask for anything at all. He had already asked his question, and I had answered it. If there's a moral, it's boring. Don't attend a memorial with a secret that will weaponize everyone's kindness. Don't confuse closure with contact. Don't let your compassion become the crowbar you use to pry open a door you promised to keep shut. Don't lie to a steady man just because your sentimental muscle is stronger than your honest one. If you must make a mistake, don't drag him into it by letting him carry your grief in one hand and your guilt in the other. People ask sometimes. Quietly, in the way women ask each other for maps. If I think he overreacted. I don't. He reacted to the thing that would have eaten us slowly anyway. The part of me that believes I can be a saint for a night with an ex, and still be an honest woman to the man I come home to. He refused to be the person who pays the interest on my sentimentality. He didn't burn my life down. He didn't file a lawsuit, call a boss, or turn mutual friends into jurors. He took his dignity, his toolbox, and the good scissors and left me the coffee grinder because he knows I need fuel to do better. I will love him for that for a long time. The casserole went bad in the fridge untouched. I threw it away on garbage night and scrubbed the Pyrex he had wiped down. And in the clean glass my face looked older, which felt like a kind of honesty I could live with. I don't know if I'll ever be the woman who tells stories at a microphone. For now, I'm the woman who labels the boxes in her closet accurately and tells the truth before anyone has to ask. If I'm ever loved like that again. Slowly, Tuesday after Tuesday. I will not take a detour to a motel because my nostalgia wants a last dance. I will send a message that says, no. I will block the number. I will tell my steady man that I am tempted and trust him to hold me to a better version of myself. Ryan won, if we're keeping score, by not playing a game I tried to get him into. He asked one hard question, and he believed the hard answer. He packed calmly. He paid his half. He kept our cat in kibble for 6 months without acting like it was leverage. He did not make me his cautionary tale. He made himself free. Derek is gone. That is a sentence without a verb big enough for it. I will miss him sometimes forever. I will miss the girl who thought love was an emergency, and that showing up in a motel could be mercy. I will build a life that uses different verbs. Listen, decline, confess, stay. And if a good man asks me a locked door question in a quiet kitchen, I will answer before he has to ask. That's the only redemption that isn't performative. That's the only way the next casserole gets eaten while it's still warm.